Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's live session. So, we are continuing with our course that is BPSC 143, and we are learning about state politics in India. Today, we will be learning about two units that is, Unit 12, Dalits, OBCs, and Women, and Unit 13, that is Linguistic and Ethnic Groups. Both these units are very important from exam point of view because they deals with identity politics in our country. So both these topics are very rich and very vast. So we have to know about all these two units in detail. So let's start from Unit 12, that is Dalits, OBCs, and Women. To introduce this unit, let's start what is Dalits and how OBCs are important for our politics. So, as we can say that it is very rare or nearly impossible to imagine Indian society and polity without these identities of caste and gender, especially the Dalits, the OBCs, and the women. So, without these identities in our society, it is very hard for us to imagine Indian society because all these identity are very important in shaping the politics of our country. So these identities these identity categories influences economic, social, and political life in India. So they have a very crucial role to play in our society because they influences the economic, the social, and the political life in India. So we can also say that they belong to the marginalized section of the society. Marginalized section of the society is when a certain number of population is being marginalized from the rest because of their occupation, because of their caste, or because of their ethnicity. So they belong to the marginalized section of the society. So in the past some years, there has been a growth in the level of their political consciousness and political mobilization. So in the past few years, we can see that they are politically more conscious now and they have been mobilized on political lines. So that is the reason why these identities are becoming so vocal and so popular in our state politics. Sorry. So, in response to their political mobilization, the state has responded with some policy formulations. This has led to their empowerment to a considerable extent. So, because of their political mobilization in the politics in India, state also responded with some kinds of policy formulations for them, which ultimately empowered them to a very considerable extent. However, despite the relative improvements in their condition in the post independence period, the Dalits, OBCs, and women still remain marginalized section in Indian society. So it's a very important thing to understand that there were so many policy formulations for these marginalized sections to come forward, but still they remain marginalized group. Sorry. So let's talk about who are Dalits. The term Dalit is of Marathi origin, which literally means broken or dilapidated. So they became popular with the emergence of the Dalit literary movement in the late 1960s. Just a second. So Dalit became popular with the emergence of the Dalit literary movement in the late 1960s with the formation of a Dalit organization in Maharashtra known as the Dalit Panthers in the early 1970s. The Dalit Panthers manifesto attempted to define the word Dalit as an umbrella term. So, what is this umbrella term? In umbrella term, all comes together. So, it sought to include diverse marginalized social groups such as the scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, neo Buddhists, poor peasants, working class, and women. So, this term Dalit got wider recognition in the 1990s at all India level. This term is popularly used by political activists, academicians, as well as media. Its eventual meaning got restricted to mean a group of people belonging to the scheduled castes only. So, Dalit came to be specifically referred as SCs, scheduled castes, in cultural, political, and even academic discourse. Thus, we can say scheduled caste and Dalits are generally used interchangeably. But there are inherent differences between the two. While Dalit represents a social and political category, whereas the scheduled caste is more of an administrative and legal category. So there is a few differences between the Dalit word and the scheduled caste, where Dalit represents a social and political category. On the other hand, scheduled caste represents administrative and legal category. So the scheduled caste are not only placed in the lowest hierarchy of the social ladder, but they also have experienced untouchability. So this practice of untouchability is very much prevalent in our Indian society since ancient times. So these population who belongs to the scheduled caste category, they were not only placed as the lowest hierarchy of the social ladder, but have also experienced untouchability. So the category of scheduled caste entitles them to avail of the state policies about protective discrimination or affirmative action as mandated in the Indian Constitution. So because they were so marginalized, they were treated as untouchables. So there were many state policies which worked on the protective discrimination or affirmative action which were mandated in the Indian Constitution. As per the Government of India Act 1935, they introduced the category of scheduled caste for all the official purposes, replacing the category of the depressed class. So from depressed class, it became now the scheduled class castes. So with the adoption of the Indian Constitution in the 1950s, as per Article 17, the practice of untouchability was legally banned and was declared a criminal offense if anybody practiced it. So this is very important. Please note down that how Article 17 of our Indian Constitution bans legally bans untouchability, and it was declared as a criminal offense if anybody practices it. Dalit have been participating in the democratic process through mobilization on social, political, cultural, and economic issues. Now let's talk about how Dalits are mobilized, about their mobilization. So, as socially discriminated and poor groups, Dalits have faced multiple problems in Indian society. So, we can say that because they are so much marginalized section in our society, they they remained discriminated and poor because they were not allowed to work. They were because they were considered as untouchables. Nobody wanted to interact with them, and they were very few jobs that is provided to them. So that is the reason why they became discriminated and poor, and it also created many problems for them, which includes humiliation, untouchability, harassment of women, etc. So these are few concerns about that Dalits faced in day-to-day lives. So although there has been a change in their social, economic, and political conditions, their problems continue in varying degrees. So political parties and Dalit social organizations have sought to mobilize them on question of, there were few questions on which they were mobilized. The first one is recognition of their social and cultural symbols. Next is political environment, and the last is the economic opportunity. So on these issues, Dalits have been mobilized by the political parties. Let's talk about mobilization of Dalits in the pre-independence period. So before independence, Dalits also always existed, and as I told you, this category has always been marginalized and discriminated since the ancient times. So what were the happenings and what were the situations before the independence when Indian Constitution was not there to guarantee them certain rights? At that point of time, how Dalits were mobilized. So in this slide, we will be talking about that. The contemporary Dalit movement has its legacy in the colonial Dalit mobilizations of various kinds in different parts of the colonial states. So there is a book by Gay Longwet on Dalits and the Democratic Revolution, Dr. Ambedkar and the Dalit movement in colonial India. So that this book is an important testimony which deals with such movements which took place before independence. So let's talk about all these four important Dalit mobilizations or Dalit movements that took place before independence. The first, this movement was led by Jyotirao Phule. He advocated the performance of marriage ceremonies and other religious rituals according to peasant traditions without the presence of the Brahmin priest. So, the first movement which we are talking about is from Maharashtra, Satyashodhak movement. So, this movement also mobilized Dalits a lot, and this was led by Jyotirao Phule. And what he advocated that the performance of marriage ceremonies and other religious rituals according to the present edition without the presence of the Brahmin priest. Also, Savitribai Phule, his wife, started the first school for girls in modern India, which is a point to be noted down. Savitribai Phule started the first school for girls in modern India and promoted education for the untouchable and Muslim girls. So, we can say that they stressed on equality of genders and they restrict themselves from discriminating according to any caste, class, creed, or religion. So this was a movement that was very popular at that point of time, and this movement was a breakthrough in that situation where caste system and prejudices were very prevalent. Next comes the self-respect movement. So this self-respect movement was led by E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar, popularly known as Periyar, in Madras Presidency. So this movement was from the south side of India. So his movement, Periyar's movement, had a far-reaching consequence in terms of building an anti-caste consciousness in southern India. So we can say that the movement led by Periyar provided a far-reaching consequence which built an anti-caste consciousness in the southern India. Bengal. Earlier, it was known as Bengal Presidency before independence. So there comes the Namashudra movement. Earlier, it was known as a Chandala. So it took place in Bengal Presidency, as I told you. It sought to unite the Dalits, OBCs, and women caste in the lower social order, who were known as Choto Log, against the disparities between them and the privileged elite class, that is Bhadra Log. So there was a distinction between these Bhadraloks and Chotoloks. So this movement tried to unite Dalits, OBCs, and women who all belong to this lower social order against the Bhadralok of Bengali society. So this was also a very important movement which took place in Bengal presidency before independence. The fourth movement, that is Adi Dharam movement, which took place in Punjab. It envisioned creating a distinct identity for the untouchables, irrespective of their religious affiliation, such as Hindu, Sikh, or Muslim. So it doesn't matter for this movement who belongs to which religion, but what was their aim was to identify distinct identity for the untouchables, irrespective of their religion. Now, this was about the pre-colonial times. Now we will move forward to the post-colonial India. After independence, what happened to the Dalit mobilization? So we will be talking about the Dalit movement in post-colonial India. The question about the identity of Dalits have become central to their political mobilization in different states of India. So, what is their identity? The identity of Dalits became the central and the focal point for the political mobilization in different states of India. The extent and patterns of their mobilization have been uneven. So, it is very important to understand that the pattern of mobilization of Dalit is not uniform. is not in a straight line, but it is uneven in different, like from one place to another, the mobilization was uneven. The first most important example of Dalit mobilization in the post independence period are the RPI in Maharashtra and Uttar Pradesh, Dalit Panthers in Maharashtra, the rise of the Bahujan Samaj Party in Uttar Pradesh in the 1980s, and its role in the politics of the state, and mobilization against the violence of Dalits in some states such as Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, or Karnataka, which took place in the 1990s. So, the important examples of the Dalit mobilization in the post-independence period are these movements or political parties which mobilized the Dalit population in our country. So let's start with the RPI and the Dalit Panthers. So after the death of Ambedkar, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar in the year 1956, those inspired by him established a political party in 1957. So Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was a very popular leader among Dalits, and not only among Dalits but for the entire nation. And the people who were inspired by him, they established a political party just after the death of their leader, that is in the year 1957, and they named it as Republican Party of India. So this Republican Party of India was formed after dissolving the AISCF, which was earlier founded by Ambedkar. So the RPI had a strong support base among the Dalits and other marginalized castes in Maharashtra and Uttar Pradesh. It addressed both fighting caste-based injustices and advocating introduction of land reforms. So, what was the aim of this RPI? They formed this party to fight the caste-based injustices that used to happen since ancient times with the Dalits or the scheduled castes, and they advocated introducing the land reforms. So its leadership and activists largely belong to the first generation educated among the marginalized communities. So this is very important point to understand, that why it is written here that leadership and activists were largely belong to the first generation educated, because earlier they were not allowed to get educated because of their caste. So it was believed that they are not capable enough to learn more, they are not capable enough to educate themselves because they belong to the lower strata of the society. So they were not allowed to enter the classroom, they were not allowed to learn more. And this that is why the when after independence, when this party was formed, Republican Party of India, that was basically belonged to the people who were the first generation educated among the marginalized communities of India. So they were the first one from their families to get education, because earlier they were not allowed to get educated because of their caste and their ethnicity. So in UP, the Republican Party of India worked in tandem with the opposition parties to mobilize people against the price rise, food shortage, and other problems faced by the common people. So this is done in UP, where the Republican Party of India worked on these problems. In Maharashtra, this was about UP. Let's talk about Maharashtra. In Maharashtra, the first generation educated and informed Dalit youths were dissatisfied with the Dalit leadership. So there were many leaders who championed the cause of the Dalits, but in Maharashtra, the people who belong to this community and also the first generation educated people, basically the Dalit youths, they were dissatisfied with the Dalit leadership. So, particularly with one belonging to the Congress and Republic Party of India. So, a cultural and literary movement had begun among the Dalits in Maharashtra with a literary magazine titled Ashmitadarsh. So, this was the magazine about the Dalits, where they were culturally more active, and they tried to express their views through this magazine. So, this magazine published radical poems, life stories related to caste atrocities, and autobiographical sketches, which became effective media of mobilization in the literary circles. So, basically, uh, With the use of this magazine, where there were radical poems about the untouchable caste, how they feel, how they are discriminated over the years, and also there were also stories, life stories of the uh, caste atrocities that they faced over time. Also, it includes the autobiographical sketches, which became a very important tool in the hands of these political parties or groups to mobilize other people from their own community. So, all such writings were inspired by the life and ideas of Ambedkar. So, Ambedkar was the hero of this community, and his ideas, his preachings were also a very important part of these magazines. So, noted Marathi literary figures like Baburao Bagul and Gangadhar Pantawane played crucial roles in shaping this movement. So, taking inspiration from Ambedkar and the Black Panther Party for self defense of the USA, young poets like Namdeo Dhasal, Raja Dhale, J.V. Pawar formed the Dalit Panthers in 1972. So, Dalit Panthers was formed in the year 1972. You should note down, because these years and these movements are very important, because it also tell us about the past happenings which brought this movement towards, like why this movement emerged. So that will help us to understand. So those short-lived Dalit, like by the mid 1970s, the infighting and factionalism between the various Ambedkarite groups, particularly Maharashtra, created a vacuum. So, as I know that, as we are learning that the Republican Party of India was very active in Uttar Pradesh, and Dalit Panthers become uh, very active in Maharashtra. So, moving forward to it, let's talk about BAMSEF, DS4, and the BSP. So, a large number of Dalit activists and intellectuals continued to educate Dalit on the need to change society in light of the ideas of life of Ambedkar. So, they needed to form a party led by Dalits with social justice and social transformation as its main agenda. So, there was a high need of making a political party which should be led by the Dalits, because they wanted to work on social justice and they wanted to socially transform the society. So that was their main aim, to make a political party. So Bahujan Samaj Party was founded on 14th of April 1984 by Kanshiram, who was the political culmination of the social cultural change which occurred among Dalits. So the date is also very important to understand. 14th April is the birth date of Dr. Ambedkar, and that was the date which was chosen by Bahujan Samaj Party and Kanshiram when this party was founded officially. So the founder of this party was Kanshi Ram, who belonged to Punjab. So he started his political activities in Maharashtra. Initially, he founded BAMSEF. So what is the full form of BAMSEF? It is Backward and Minority Committees Employees Federation. So earlier it was BAMSEF. From that only it graduated into a political party. So the BAMSEF focused on the mobilization of central government employees belonging to backward and minority communities. So what was the task of BAMSEF? It was to mobilize the people from the central government employees who belong to this marginalized section of the society. So BAMSEF was later transformed to DS4. So what is this DS4? So D for Dalit and 4S, that is Shoshit Samaj Sangharsh Samiti. It is very important to know all the terms of this DS4. So kindly note it down that it is Dalit Shoshit Samaj Sangharsh Samiti. That is why it is written as DS4, because there is four terms with starting with S. So in 1984, Kanshiram founded BSP, that is Bahujan Samaj Party, a political party. It meant to empower the Bahujan Samaj. Bahujan Samaj means the majority population, by capturing power through the electoral process. In BSP's definition, Bahujan Samaj consists of majority social groups such as the Dalits, OBCs, religious minorities. So it also excluded the so-called high caste such as Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas. So we can see that this party was basically for the majority social groups who are Dalits, OBCs, and religious minorities, whereas it excludes the high caste people, that is Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas. So the Bahujan Samaj Party in UP represented an example of most successful political party with a strong support base among Dalits. So it is considered as the most successful political party among Dalits, and it became one of the most effective parties from the 1990s until the early 2010. So that was the time period when this BSP Bahujan Samaj Party became very popular. Mayawati, the BSP leader, became Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh 4 times. So, by this, we can see how the party was so popular among the masses, because for the 4 terms they elected Bahujan Samaj Party. So, different BSP governments introduced policies for the welfare of Dalits, especially the Ambedkar village. So, participation of Dalits on electoral politics, about Dalit, OBCs, and women politics, and social and cultural activities has also increased over the years. But it is very sad that it should not show a uniform pattern throughout the country. So there are instances of Dalit mobilization around the protection of their social and cultural identities and human rights across different states of India. So they were mobilized through these things where they were uh, given their identity, or given protection to their identity, their social and cultural identities basically, and the human rights across different states of India. So that is all with the Dalits, and now we will move forward to the OBCs. So who are OBCs? The answer is the backward social groups other than the SCs are known as other backward classes. Do remember that SC means scheduled caste, whereas OBC means other backward class. So you have to see the difference, because that we will learn further how and why this is so. So the OBCs has not experienced untouchability. So what is the difference between the SCs and the OBCs? The SCs experienced untouchability since a very long time, but the OBCs, they can OBCs can from any caste. Like there are multiple castes, and it's an heterogeneous group. So OBCs are placed in the graded social hierarchy. They have been traditionally engaged in different caste based occupations. So, OBCs consist of castes situated in the middle of the social hierarchy. So, as we learned that the Dalits were considered to belong to the lower social order, the OBCs belong to the middle of the social hierarchy, whereas the Brahmins or the upper caste, they belong to the highest order. So, thus, class in OBC represents nothing but a group of several castes. The traditional occupation of the middle caste have been related to land cultivations. So, as we all know that India is an agricultural country, so the occupations, traditional occupation of these middle caste people, that was all related to the land cultivation. So those castes belong, those castes below them have largely been to provide traditional services to the middle and the higher caste. So the OBCs can be divided into land owning caste, or upper OBCs, and the most backward caste, MBCs, or extremely backward classes. So we can say that because of their land owning capacity, they can be called as OBCs, MBCs, or EBCs. In some states, the socially and educationally more backward classes are demanding that they be officially recognized as the MBCs, that is, most backward classes. So, demand for their recognition is often made in other states. So, in many states, as I told you, it is uneven. So, there are many demands to convert OBCs into MBCs or EBCs. So there are different caste groups that form a broad category of OBCs that has been impacted by the state policies and changes within these castes. Since the 1950s, the middle caste or the OBCs have been the beneficiaries of land reforms. So now we are talking about the time when India got independence. So since the 1950s, the middle caste or the OBCs have been beneficiaries of land reforms that were introduced by the Indian government after independence. So this is due to the abolition of the intermediaries that had existed between them and the state machinery under the zamindari system. So in some other state, these castes was also the beneficiaries of the Green Revolution that took place in the decade of 1960s. So there are many castes from this OBC category who were beneficiaries of the Green Revolution. By the 1970s, the land-owning middle caste emerged as an articulate and politically vocal class. So one of the principal objective of the socialist mobilization was to empower the OBCs. Now let's talk about what were the issues among the OBC, like what were the issues they were facing. So the main issues concerning the OBCs are relating to the demand for new caste groups to be included in the OBC category. So they wanted more categories, more caste groups into the already existing OBC category. So the demand of subdivision of OBC quota into two groups, that is MBC and EBC. So MBC is most backward classes and EBC is extremely backward classes. So these were the subdivisions that people wanted, they were demanding. There were also demand of some MBCs or OBCs to be recognized by the government as the SC and ST communities. So there is also demand to convert these OBCs into SC and ST communities, and also people were demanding for recognition of cultural symbols of caste or seeking awards like those of Bharat Ratna for their own caste heroes. So there were also demands by the people belonging to this category about the declaration of public holidays in the memory of their caste icons, symbols, or heroes. So this was all about the issues of OBCs. Now let's move forward to a very important topic, that is the Mandal Commission report. Mandal Commission is very important to understand because it mobilized OBCs a lot. So the mobilization of the OBCs started in southern India much before it began in northern India. So it is a very important point to remember. The mobilization process of other backward classes were started in southern India first and then it influenced northern India. So the reservation for the OBCs in the public institutions in the states was introduced at different times in different states up to the late 1970s. So at all India level, the Mandal Commission report was introduced by the VP Singh government in 1990. So when was this report was introduced? It was introduced in the year 1990 during the VP Singh government. The implementation of the Mandal Commission took place after more than a decade of submission of the Mandal report, that is in the year 1980. So after the introduction of or the submission of the Mandal report in 1980, it took around a decade to get it implemented. So the Mandal Commission was appointed by the Janata Party government with Morarji Desai as the Prime Minister. So as we can see that the Mandal Commission was formed or the commission was appointed by the Janata Party government, which came after the emergency period when Morarji Desai was the Prime Minister, and its implementation happened in the 1990s, almost a decade or 11-12 years gap. So Mandal Commission report sorry, Mandal Commission report was the first report which led to introduction of reservation for the OBCs at the all India level. Now, we talked about Dalits, we talked about OBCs, now we come to women. So women are essentially a very important thing to understand because they consist of almost 50% of the population of our world. So women are essentially a universal category present across populations throughout the world. So as a marginalized section of the society in India, women face few discriminations, few or many, as I can say, discriminations on day-to-day life. So let's talk about these discrimination that they used to face on a daily basis. The first and the foremost is the denial of right to inherit property. So this denial to right to inherit property also contributed in more discrimination and more severe situation for women when they are not economically independent. So the other one is the gender based inequality in everywhere, and also lack of equability, freedom to make choice of jobs, marriage or way to lead life, inadequate or lack of representation in political institutions are few problems that women largely face. So there are many efforts toward addressing the women's concern which can be traced the pre-independence period. So let's talk about the pre-independence period when women issue was also prevalent at that point of time. So in the 19th century, women's issues were addressed by the social reformers. So who were thinking about women back then? It was the social reformers who were mobilizing women and thinking about the women issues that they face on daily lives. The social reformers fought against ill social practices which was prevalent at that point of time, which includes sati pratha, the practice of sati, practice of child marriage, and prohibition of widow remarriage. So these were few ill practices, social ill practices that was very prevalent before independence of India. So among women leaders, there were Savitribai Phule, whom we learned that she was the first one who started a school for women. Also, Fatima Sheikh, Pandita Ramabai, to name a few, they were also women leaders who were championing the cause of the women and talking about the issues that women face. In the post independent period, several civil society organizations, the general public, and individuals took up issues relating to women's rights. In the 1970s, the country saw an increased consciousness about women's issue. So 1970s was the decade when women's issues become very important, and people started focusing on that because there was an increased consciousness. Also, the emerging consciousness about women's issue reflected a general trend of mobilization on the rise of different sections and aspects of society. So there are movements relating to these issues which came to be known as new social movements. So what is this new social movement? The new social movements were identified by certain features. There, what are these features? The first is the apolitical nature, new kind of issues, and newly emerged social groups. So among the women issues, what are the issues that are included in women which they face on daily basis? The first is the subordination and exploitation, women's reservation in the parliament and legislative assemblies, rape, punishment by a khap, child marriage, domestic violence, etc. So all these issues bothers women across the world, irrespective of their class, caste, religion, etc. So they face so many problems on day-to-day life. So, with this, we are done with Unit 12, where we talked about the Dalits, the OBCs, and women. Now, we will be moving forward to Unit 13, which talks about linguistic and ethnic groups. So, do remember that we are doing the identity politics block, where Dalit, OBCs, and women also forms an identity of themselves. Here in Unit 13, we will be talking about the linguistic identities and ethnic identities of the population. So here we will be focusing on two groups which are like linguistic groups and ethnic groups. So what are the linguistic and ethnic groups? The first question which comes in our mind is who and what are these linguistic and ethnic groups? So, to understand, the linguistic group is a group of people who feel that they share a common language. Who belongs to this linguistic group? The people who feel that they belong to a common language. Like, for example, the Bengalis feel that they are one because they spoke one language, Bengali. The Odia will speak Odia because, and they will feel among themselves that they have something in common because they speak Odia. Similarly, an ethnic group is a group of people who think that they share similarities in several aspects such as religion, language, culture, customs, traditions, caste, race, economy, etc. So for linguistic group, it is only the language that is the connecting point for commonality. In ethnic group, there are many similarities, such as the religious, language, culture, custom, tradition, caste, race, economy, etc. So linguistic group is formed on the basis of single factor or marker, that is language, as I told you, whereas an ethnic group is formed on the basis of multiple factors. Like we learned in this slide that how multiple factors can bring people together ethnically. So let's talk about the linguistic groups. There are two levels of identification of the linguistic groups, that is national and state or union territories. So at all India level, the linguistic majority consists of Hindi speakers and other linguistic groups are linguistic minorities. So the groups within the states which do not speak the language of the majority are linguistic minorities. So here we can see who are linguistic majorities and who are linguistic minorities. So all states of India have more than one linguistic group. So as we all know that India is a country where there are n number of languages that used to exist all together in the same land. So there are more than one linguistic group, and that is why there is identity crisis among these linguistic groups, because they feel that they become their language is becoming extinct because of the majority linguistic groups. Let's talk about the linguistic groups in India. In India, languages can be classified into different categories like mother tongues, dialects, and official languages. So, these are the three categories in which the in languages in India is categorized. Let's talk about what is mother tongue. So, mother tongue is the language which a person learns from his or her childhood. Whereas a dialect denotes mother tongue spoken by a particular community or group of communities generally living in a particular geographical area. So, dialect has their base in the geographical location of the country, whereas mother tongue is the language which people speaks generally from the time of their childhood. Let's talk about the official languages. So, official languages are those mother tongues or dialects which have got official recognition for official works and medium of instruction in educational institution. So, the mother tongue or the dialects which were given recognition by the official government, so that becomes the official language. Now let's talk about the three language formula which took place, which we will be learning how this works. So each state in India has multiple languages, as we all know, and as I told you that there are many languages spoken in India, and it is often said that in every 25 kilometers the language and the dialect changes. So in a country so diverse linguistically, there are multiple languages which exist in a same country together. So the main challenge in the country has been to how to enable school children to interact with each other across diverse linguistic groups across states. So it is a task for our country to see the country is challenge. They face challenges to enable the school students to interact with each other, and if there are so many languages existing in a same class, how people will interact, because somebody is saying a language which is not like the other person is not knowing that. So what happened is it was introduced as a three language formula, which suggests that in states children should be made to learn three languages up to class 6 to 8 standard, that is apart from Hindi and English a modern Indian language should be taught. Since language is a state subject because as I already told you in our previous classes that there are three lists: union list, state list, and concurrent list. So language belongs to the state list. Which language to be included in the three language formula fall under the jurisdiction of the state. So it is up to state which have the capacity or right to decide which language, the third language will be what to be included in the curriculum. So, following the recommendations of the National Commission on Education, 1964 to 66, also known as Kothari Commission. This is a very important point to note down. So, it was the Kothari Commission which talk about the three language formula which was included in National Education Policy 1968. So it was recommended by the Kothari Commission or National Commission on Education 1964-66. The three language formula was included in the National Education Policy in 1968. The new education policy, which came in the year 2020, suggested that at least up to grade 5, the medium of instruction should be mother tongue, and wherever possible, it should be any of the following like mother tongue, home language, local language, or regional language up to grade 8. Let's talk about linguistic groups and politics in India. The significance of language as the basis of identity in India was recognized in the early 20th century when Congress had organized itself on the linguistic lines. So, the significance of the language as the basis of identity in India, it was recognized back in the 20th century when Congress had organized itself on linguistic lines. So, after independence, the Congress had shown its reluctance to organize states on the linguistic basis. After independence, Congress was very reluctant to organize states on linguistic basis because there was a fear that if we divide states on linguistic basis, there can be autonomic questions on Indian territory. So to avoid that, Congress was not so much in support of organizing states on the linguistic basis. It is still the State Reorganization Commission which made its recommendation for linguistic organization of states. So this happened in the wake of the death of a Gandhian, P. Sriramulu in 1953, who was on hunger strike demanding a Telugu state out of then Madras state because they feel that in a Madras state their Telugu language is not given much priority and much importance, and for that P. Sriramulu, who was the Gandhian, went for hunger strike so that his demand of a linguistic state, a different linguistic state apart from Madras state, should be fulfilled. And with the death of P. Sriramulu, the government started appointing a committee which can see what can be done on this basis, and for that the State Reorganization Commission was appointed. So, the reorganization of the states on the linguistic basis in 1956, however, did not resolve the language question. Even after reorganizing the states on linguistic basis in the year 1956, it did not resolve the language question because it gave rise to the language-based conflicts within the states. So now what happened is after states became linguistically, they separated among themselves. Now there is language-based conflict which started taking place. Such politics or the linguistic politics has been impacted by the following factors. So what are these factors? The factors are perception of linguistic of themselves and of linguistic majorities, the linguistic majorities' perception of the linguistic minorities, and the attitude of the linguistic majority towards the linguistic minorities. So these were the factors which was impacting the linguistic politics. So there were demands of linguistic groups. What are these demands? So the demands, other linguistic groups accept the language of the majorities as medium of instruction in educational institution and as the official language. For recognition of language as an official language or its inclusion in the 8th schedule and their recognition as official language. Also, they demand economic development, employment, protection of their cultural identities and political autonomy. So these were the demands that these linguistic groups were asking. Now, we came to the last part of our topic, that is ethnic groups in India. So politics of ethnic groups revolves around the issues. What are the issues? Social and cultural identities, political representation and autonomy, and economic opportunities or development. So These politics of ethnic groups revolves around what issues? The identities apart from language, class, etc. So these ethnic groups talks about the social and cultural identities. Also, they were very much bothered about their political representation and autonomy issues. Economic opportunities and development has always been a cause of problems in these movements. So it sometimes result in ethnic violence as well between the ethnic groups or between ethnic groups and state machinery. The politics of ethnic groups is decided by the course of the politics of ethnic majorities. So, as we can say that different states in India witness different ethnic politics. So, with this, let's sum up today's session. We started with Unit 12, that is about Dalits, OBCs, and women. So, as I told you, we are continuing with a blog which talks about identity politics in India, especially in state also. So, these identities, they all exist in the same country, and it is very important to address their issues because all these identities have separate issues of their own. They they experience separate issues, separate problems, and for that they demand separate things for them. They demand for their own for their own education, their cultural belongingness. They wanted to save their language. So these are the identities that people have in our country. So we started our session with Dalits. Who were Dalits? As I told you, they were the earlier untouchable classes who were treated as untouchables, and people restrict themselves to get involved with them because there was a perception that they belong to the lower strata of life and they are impures. So there is a notion of purity and impurity in these caste system. So Dalits and the scheduled caste, rather, they were considered to be impures, and people don't consider touching them just for the sake of their caste identity. So before independence, also they gathered together. They wanted some changes in their condition. Ambedkar was the champion of their cause because he also belonged to the same community. But Dr. Ambedkar tried to move forward and bring this community from darkness to the towards the light. So he fought for many injustices, many discrimination that these community used to face. They were not provided jobs, they were not treated equally, they were not allowed to use wells in a village. Their wells or their ponds were separate because it is believed that if they touch the pond or touch the well's water, nobody else can have it. So there was very misconceptions and very discriminatory practices that these people faced at even today also. It is not totally gone. It is still there in the minds, in people minds. The notion of untouchability or notion of discrimination is still there, but before independence it was more prevalent. People were not given jobs, were not allowed in the education institute to move forward. They were not allowed to come forward and change their life. They were just they remained with their occupation. They remained in their own hubs because they were not even allowed to mix with other population. After independence, there were many movements like Dalit Panthers and RPI, and there were also political parties which came forward, which tried to convert the devastated condition of these community people into a fruitful transition. Like they wanted to give them mobilization, they wanted to give them politically active. So a political party was established for that. Bahujan Samaj Party gathered and mobilized the Dalits in basically in UP, and it was also famous. And why the name was given to Bahujan Samaj Party? Because according to Bahujan Samaj Party, all these Dalit categories or the scheduled caste or the lower strata of the society, they forms the majority of the population, Bahujan. So they feel that because they are in majority but still are discriminated by the minority group according to them, that is the high class groups, high caste groups. So political party was also formed, and they with the advent of that political party, many people who were earlier not much politically involved, they started getting involved in politics, and because of that the causes of this community was now more vocal as compared to earlier times when they were not given political representation. After Dalit, we talked about the OBCs, how OBCs were also a backward class, but they were not considered to be untouchables. But the conditions, the poverty was also there, as SCs and STs, they were also facing many problems because of their class. They were not socially and educationally uh, active. They were not have that much of resources to uh, provide education to their community, and so they were very discriminated as well, but they were not considered untouchables. They were considered the middle class groups. So next comes the women category. Also women, although they consider or they consist of more than, or we can say the half of the population of our world, still women are considered to be marginalized section, which is a very sad reality. So as we can see that how women who consider to be a very important part of our world, still they are marginalized, they feel discrimination, they were not given proper education. There is also problems of violence against the women. There is also caste problems, because if you belong to Dalit caste, that is very like for in our society, that is considered to be very pathetic condition. But even if you belong to Dalit caste and you are a woman, your conditions are more severe. So we can see that there is an intersectionality between the caste, class, and gender in our country, in our state politics, in our Indian politics. So we can say that even though women consist of such a huge population, their issues are not being addressed in such a manner. There were many movements which used to happen at that point of time, before independence also and after independence also. It in the previous time, in the pre-independence period, it was the social reformers who came with the issues of women, who championed the cause of women who was facing severe violence due to practices like sati pratha, and child marriages was there, widow remarriage was not allowed at that point of time. So social reformers were the person who talked about women in the pre-independence period. Not also, we have to remember that social reformers are not only male, but there are many women social reformers also who worked on these issues. After independence, the year 1970s saw a boost in a consciousness among the women about their choices, about their rights, about their identity, and they started working, and they started addressing the issues relating to women. Also, there were many laws that were formed in favor of women, such as if we take example of domestic violence. So earlier it was considered to be bright burning, but with the increasing consciousness, people considered this domestic violence not only a personal thing but a political problem. So there were many issues that came forward uh, with the consciousness among women about their happenings, about their situations, and government also, state policies were also formulated to address those issues. But it is very important to understand that still these Dalits, OBCs, and women are considered to be marginalized section of the society. Similarly, we move forward to Unit 13, where we talked about the linguistic and ethnic groups, where language became a commonality between people, and how, because of their language, they are being discriminated by the majority of people who spoke a same language. So, we can also see that in linguistic politics or linguistic groups, they also feel disconnected with the language that they don't want to speak and they don't know. So there was also a conflict between the North India versus South India about languages. because they didn't wanted Hindi to be the official language, because according to the South Indian people, they don't know Hindi, they don't belong to Hindi culture, and it is something which is only related to the northern part of India, and their own language is something else. So they wanted a language which should be spoken by all, not only the only northern belt of our country. So this is all about today's session. We will move forward to the next class where we'll be talking about unit 14 and 15. The 14 is regions and tribes, and 15 is new social groups. So with this,